Okay, folks, welcome to ELA 7. This is your second lesson for the four agreements, the TFA. Okay, just some housekeeping stuff real quick, since I didn't make the announcements at community meeting. Okay, so let's go over some stuff real quick. Work submissions for ELA this cycle, this session, will be marked or will be graded with uh, keeping in mind when work has been submitted. So if it's submitted late, it's not going to get the full points. If it's incomplete, it's not going to get the full points. I will return it to you and give you a chance to master the material, but it's very important that when an assignment is given, that you're actually looking at the assignment and looking at each step in the assignment and what is required. Because let's say that I give someone a 70% for completing the notes for the first reading. Okay? Now, they can go back and see, geez, what is missing? Most of the time I'll give you notes or comments on your work about what is missing. So those things need to be turned back in afterwards. You're not going to get the full 100 points because why would I give or why should you expect 100% if you only gave 80 or 90% of your effort and focus in getting the assignment done correctly? You've been kind of given a gift all the time on most assignments in ELA up until this point in the year. Now it's time to step up, okay? So you will not be getting full points if you are not meeting what is actually expected in the assignment, okay? And I'll try to be more precise in giving the assignments because that's on me, right? So I can't take off points because people thought that they were only supposed to write for 5 minutes. Well, that's done. We've talked about it in community meeting. It's no longer an expectation. What is the expectation? When you're asked a question, you need to be answering it as fully and as completely as you possibly can. Okay, enough preaching on that. Let's get on. ELA 3, I have shared with you. If you go to ELA 3, I've combined all of the submissions, redacted people's names. The main reason I want you to see that work is so that you can recognize that each person looks at everything differently, and notices certain things. That's why we all need each other. You see things in a particular way that others can't. So when we come together, we produce a fuller picture and not just partial pictures. That's the problem with society today, is that everyone is splitting off and saying, I see it this way, I see it this way. Well, you're not wrong. You see it that way, but it needs to be tempered with the view of other people and the perception of other people. So give other people a chance because you're expecting them to give you a chance with your perception, with your opinion. And given the information that you have, you're probably right. You're probably seeing the truth. More on that in a minute because we're going to talk about what is mentioned in the domestication and in the dream chapter. But let's keep going. I think that was all the announcements I had. Yes, it was. So let's get on with domestication. Now, I did the old-fashioned way. I looked up the definition of domestication in the dictionary. Now, the instructions for the assignment was to try to figure out, based on the definitions that are available, what was the author meaning when he was discussing domestication. Let me give you some information on this. Okay, so when I looked it up, the first definition is to adopt. I'm like, wait a minute. Now, when I hear adopt, you think, oh, you're going to adopt a kid, or you're going to adopt a puppy, or a damaged animal, or a injured animal that you're going to nurse back to health. Okay, but this adopt means to take upon oneself, to adapt, to change. And actually adapt is the second definition, is to adapt to like an environment. The first one, adopt, is like adopting certain practices that you're going to live by. And the third one, which I thought was really interesting, was to bring to the level of ordinary people. Domesticate. I guess what they mean by that is to make something useful, functional. Okay? So, what does this have to do with Montessori? Because in the lessons, and how I've described them on Google Classroom, is that we're going to relate this to Montessori philosophy. In Montessori philosophy, domestication could be seen as the word normalization, which is what norms, Norms, what norms are practiced. That's how people would define an ordinary person or a normal, because they live by the certain norms of the community, the expectations of the community. So every word has a specific connotation to it. So that's why we have to be kind of open-minded when we're reading, that we can't just take one definition of a word when in reality there may be 2 or 3 different ways that that word can be used. Like if you noticed, I think I had this as a term to look up for this set of pages, was discriminate. If someone accused me of practicing discrimination, I would say, yes, I practice discrimination. Well, wait a minute, Mr. Patrick. Discrimination means you're giving certain people preferential treatment. Well, no, that's or you're giving them treatment that is not equal to what you would give someone else. That's probably more of one of the definitions. But there's many definitions. There's a few definitions of discriminate. Discriminate means to be able to look and compare. You discriminated in ELA 3. You were discriminate. That means you were describing the specifications that existed within the IKEA chair in comparison to the antique chair, for lack of a better term. So you were being discriminatory, and that was a part of the assignment. So let's get back to the 4 agreements. So Maria Montessori in her classrooms talks about normalization. Now, I visited a high school program during our most recent spring break, and there I was speaking with the director, and she was explaining to me that we have to deprogram or de-normalize students in order to then normalize them in what is expected within the Montessori environment. So that's what we do. That's why it's tough for students to transfer into a Montessori setting, because they haven't been normalized in the expectations of a Montessori environment. Okay, 4 agreements. They talk about the dream. Okay, again, here is another word that could mean a few different, have a few different connotations as far as their meaning go. So dream is typically what we think about when we go to sleep at night and we can have a dream. Or in the waking world, and we talk about a dream, we say, oh, he's living the dream, or she's living the dream. Michael Phelps is living the dream because he was able to accomplish this amount in his swimming career. Maria Navratilova, I think it's how you pronounce her name, in the tennis world. You know, Amelia Earhart, you know, they were all living what they dreamed they could be, and they made it possible through action. Okay, so some synonyms for dream in the TFA is story, right? The dream that we tell ourselves, or our interpretation, or our understanding, or our world view. where does that worldview originate? And I use that word specifically. Where does it originate? What is its origin? Where does it come from? Okay? Isn't that the big philosophical question? Where do we come from? And then the silly one that people like to mention, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or another silly question, philosophical question they think is philosophical. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make any noise? Yeah, it makes noise because it's moving. Whether someone's there to perceive that moving and that sound that's produced is beside the point. It's doing what it does. Okay, so as you're reading, I hope you're really considering the things that you agree with, the things that you don't agree with, and the things that, hey, you know what, I'm still questioning. I don't know. That's an okay place to be, because especially, you know what, I was just going to say, especially if you're a student, but life, we never cease being a student. Yes, I'm pausing for effect. Sorry to give you this news, but you will never, well, you might decide not to be a student anymore. And that means that you probably have to go live by yourself, because in order to grow and to change and to mature or to progress, we need to respond to our stimulus that's all around us. And usually that means people. Okay, so we need to respond to people. We need people in order to experience life more fully. Look, humans are gifted or cursed, or depends how you look at it, with the need to be social, the need to be creative, the need to find meaning. Maria Montessori called these the natural tendencies, and she researched them in anthropology. That's why we're doing some research related to Maria Montessori, and why she may have studied anthropology. You know, she wanted to find out what the origins of things were. Okay, just like this author is, and the Toltec people. Now, one thing that I don't necessarily agree with in the chapter was the part where they said, well, they kept the knowledge, or they view the knowledge as esoteric, which usually, if you hear that word, it should bring up ideas of secrecy or special knowledge. But esoteric just means wisdom that is concealed. Now, isn't that the way our whole world and our whole life is? Everything's concealed until you uncover it, unwrap it, discover it, explore. Okay? So, we are a product of our environment. I would agree that many of our thoughts, many of our judgments, many of our beliefs come from our parents, because that's who we're with most people are when they're born, is that their immediate circle of caregivers influences the way they interpret the world. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but there were experiments done by the Nazis on little babies. Some were purposely left unattended, and others were given extreme care. Okay, and then another set was given, like adequate care. They were playing with development, testing human development to see what would happen. Now, the children that were basically ignored, okay, some of them died. Not because they didn't get their needs met right away. It's probably because they didn't feel loved or valued. It might be because no one was paying attention to them. They might have been watching from outside a room, watching them, and they were paying attention but not giving care. There's a difference, right? In the last video that we talked, I shared with you the story about my first job as a custodian or as a maintenance guy at a bank in their lobby and in their front entrance area where the ATM machine was. Well, my supervisor wanted me to do a careful job. He wanted me to pay attention to detail. That's what we want as Montessori guides for you and for myself. I need to hold myself to that same standard. Pay attention, invest energy, invest time. Okay, I've blabbed enough. It's already almost 16 minutes into this. It hasn't been a 16-minute lesson because I gave, announcements at the beginning. So, yes, we are a product of our environment. We are normalized given the environment that we are raised in, right? I don't like the word programmed because it makes it sound like man is like a computer, but man is not like a computer. Research that. No, this is not an assignment. You don't have to do this. You can do this. How are humans like a computer and how are humans not like a computer? Okay, so that's why I didn't use the word programmed. I said how we've been trained, how we've been normalized, how we've been adapted or made to adapt to certain environments. That's all. Okay, I can blab on forever. Thank you for listening, and I'm so glad that you've been patient with me in getting this lesson out to you. Okay, so more on the next chapter, and that's going to be due next week. See you then. I have a YouTube channel. I'm not plugging myself to sell anything. I'm just letting you know that I want to make good on how I would make lessons for my the YouTube channel, and I'd always end it with be better, do better, or it was either do better and be better. Whichever comes first, you get the same result. So, thank you for your patience.